kind of bridge the generation gap, I would say, between my mother and all of us here. Because it was her desire where she wanted to honor Mr. T.K. Rahim and Dr. Geralyn Pinto. She said, you know, when we have such budding talent here, it's best, you know, I recognize that. Being, 80 plus, she says this is a platform, and probably this would lead to other occasions where people would use this platform to encourage other artists, you know, in all art form, be it writing, or be it poetry, be it painting, sculpture, or anything, the finer senses of a human being, art. So then she decided the best time would be when my two sisters are here. We would have a kind of a cozy evening, and as my two professor friends said there, when I, was despairing that it was, it suddenly started raining, they said, no, this is the atmosphere for art. They said, art and poetry, this is it. This is what we are looking forward to. So before we, have Geralyn's session and Rahim's session, my mother would like to honor them. She has a little something to honor both of you. She says, I recognize their talent. I recognize the genius in them, because not everyone can write like the way Geralyn or Rahim, they write. They have gone on and broken forth all barriers, and they have written. And most of us have, it's delightful for us, to just hear them recite and hear them speak what they feel. So I invite Rahim and I invite Jerry to please come and occupy our Wakil bench, as we call it. And my mother to come. Give it to Jerry. Should I stand?
I've been covered very decently. I'll start with a story of mine. I trust you won't find it too long. It's called I'll Do, and I'll Do. And the words have been taken from Shakespeare's Macbeth. And I've got two of my English teachers here, former Professor Matilda Pinto, Professor Urmila, who actually taught me Macbeth. So some of the credit could go to them as well as the psychology department of St. Agnes College, where the students were asked to conduct this assembly. And very interestingly, they had a whole lot of interesting phobias, as it were, which they explored in the course of the assembly to kind of educate the audience. And one of them was about the alien hand syndrome. I was absolutely fascinated by that. I think it was one of the students of that particular batch is sitting right there, Devaka, and one of his classmates came very kindly, loaded it on our computer, and when Save as Writers in Canterbury, in whose contest the contest of which I've been participating, decided to host this Shakespearean International Creative Writing Contest last year in honor of the 450th year of the birth of William Shakespeare, Bard of Avon. Luigi Marchini, who was the chairman, told me about it, and I kept telling my colleagues, Sonia and Zubeda, I said, what am I going to tell the British about Shakespeare? I mean, that might be, impudent. I suppose somewhere I'm still a bit colonized. And then it occurred to me, I hate losing an opportunity, partly because I'm living again a second chance. I'm like a terrier, was terrier tenacity. So I said, I can't let this slip through my fingers. I think sheer despair made me think, why shouldn't I use one of the syndromes that the psychology students had literally taught me about and adapt it to a character like Lady Macbeth. And first I thought of, this amputation syndrome. I'm afraid I can't remember what it's all about, with something to do with people falling in love with amputees or wanting to amputate themselves. Some kind of, it's a kind of, what should I say? It's a form of mental ill health, I guess. And then that didn't fit somehow, and then I finally zeroed upon this alien hand syndrome, which was also called the Dr. Strangelove syndrome. And I need to tell you about this because otherwise you might get slightly confused. It is caused when people have injuries to the anteromedial lobe of the brain, usually in things like car crashes, or maybe when they've been slugged with bullets in the brain. And this really happens because one limb, usually a hand or an arm, goes totally out of control. And it refuses to obey the commands of the brain. So the brain may tell you one thing, but the arm acts of its own volition. So that is the background to the story. And you must understand that there are two narrators in my story. One is Bhaskar, or should I really say Bhaskar, because it's set in Bengal, but I'll call him Bhaskar, who is telling the story. And another part is where he keeps referring us to the diary of his late cousin, the now deceased Andrila. So parts of it will be Bhaskar himself speaking directly to the reader. The other part will be diary entries. So I tried to use what I hoped would be a more interesting narrative technique, because after having been in Save as Writers and being a member of this British online writers group called Alibi, I've tried to evolve new strategies of telling stories. This story, I'm very happy to tell you, finally ended up getting the 3rd prize at the Shakespearean International Creative Writing Contest. We were all shortlisted, and I actually went up to Canterbury last year, and the awards evening was held at the 700-year-old Dominican Priory, and they tried to make it a little like the booker. The judge goes up and she talks about the shortlisted, and then she talked about each one of these. And I can't resist telling you that she kept saying the story was set in 1960s Bengal, because she was British, obviously. She couldn't even pronounce Bengal, but that was fine. And then I was told I'd finally discovered I'd got 3rd prize, which made me happy anyway. The 1st or 2nd wouldn't have hurt, but the 3rd made me happy. Yes. Okay. So I'll give you a reading of I'll do, and I'll do. It was a colonial sort of thing to do, I suppose. Sit by the French windows in the reading room of the Royal Bengal Club and read your Shakespeare. Outside, a muslin mist rose from the Hooghly, but your mind was full of the quality of Mercy's speech, which had been dinned into you as the most poignant bit of persuasion you could ever expect to find, and never east of the Suez. We should have got over the empire after 20 years of independence, but we hadn't. Andrila said it was a carefully cultivated hangover, and we'd never get over what we didn't want to. Andrila was my cousin on my late mother's side, sinuous, black as a switch, and eyes like shadows on slate. Her teeth came as a surprise of white when her lips were parted, which they often did in laughter when she was with me. Both of us loved Shakespeare, and I knew that she loved me to bits, in spite of one of my legs being crippled by polio. We had played Shakespeare games since we were 13. One of them was Lady Macbeth. It was set in the 20th century on Harley Street. It had to be Harley, you understand. I was always the doctor, and the mysterious Lady M was my patient. I'd take the case history. Name? Lady M. Gender? Indeterminate. Meaning what? Meaning neither male nor female, doctor. I've been effeminated. That's why I have no heart, see, in this breast of mine. No feelings at all. Empty. That's what I am. Nothing at all, doctor, except for the ideas inside my head. And what ideas are these, Lady M? Just this, Doctor. Then Andrilla would make a clever little movement, a kind of sleight of hand, and swish out an imaginary dagger and go for where both of us thought my jugular was located. I would thrash about and choke and then go stiff and still. Andrilla would laugh throatily like they did in second-rate horror movies and say, "Yet, who would have thought the old man to have so much blood in him?" Some years later, I learnt where the jugular was when I joined Calcutta Medical College. Andrilla and I met on weekends when I could spare the time and walked slowly down to the Shalimar and had tea or just spent the evening at the Royal Bengal, as I'm doing now, waiting for the inevitable and thinking out the answers I'll be called upon to give. It was on one of those walks that we met an itinerant Romani woman who insisted that I cross her palm with silver and that she would tell me my future. I picked out an 8-anna coin, and she studied my lines of fortune carefully. "You will be a rich man, very rich. In your hand I see vast land in the 24 Parganas. And I see a woman. Oi, it is a lal dog, a red spot." Meaning love, or what? I demanded to know. But with a flash of slant eyes, she had disappeared into the gathering shadows of Mayo Street. "Another woman in your life?" Andrilla asked. "Oh, you believe in this sort of thing, Vaskar? This Romani business?" "I believe in good fortune, certainly, Andrilla. I don't know about fortune tellers. I believe in making my own." I was specializing in neurology. It was central neuropathy that interested me most. What happened to people's brains and spinal cords when someone slugged them with bullets or sank a knife into them, or when they were in a car crash. I had already decided to take the fellowship in England, and if it just couldn't be Harley, it would be a practice in the fashionable Thomas Cook building on Kolkata's Roy Sircar Avenue. I didn't tell Andrilla that day, I wouldn't even admit it to myself, that the old Romani hag had set me thinking about my aunt, Binodini Day, and her extensive property in the 24 Parganas. She hadn't any children of her own. Her nearest of kin were my cousin Pratap Chandra Sen and me, and she made it clear that the land would be divided between us, neatly down the middle. But one day, I remember turning to Andrilla and whispering, "Would you say, Lady M, that I suffer from vaulting ambition to want all that property of Aunt Binodini's for a noble cause, my career in neuropathy? After all, what will Pratap ever need it for except to finance his next joint of hashish?" Pratap was a waster, hooked on hashish and addicted to addas, those unspeakable eateries where he hung about with other wasters who dignified themselves with the label Marxists. What do Marxists want with money anyway, A.M.? Andrilla smiled sweetly at me and recited, "Only look up clear, to alter favor ever is to fear. Leave all the rest to me." I took her up into my arms, crumpled her against my chest, and this time I kissed her in public. So that's what I'll tell them, all about my cousin Andrilla. I've got her diary written in her own hand and her case history file right here with me. Maybe her story is best told as she put it down, Andrilla's diary.